So here we are back at the assumptions and drivers section of the model that I showed you earlier. We're going to take some of the information that we were given, some of the qualitative information, and start thinking about how that may inform assumptions and drivers in this model. In particular, want to make sure that you're following along to see how these changes affect the income statement as well as the cash flow statement. We're actually only going to look at 3 line items, which are here, 2 from the income statement and 1 from the balance sheet. And I'll explain each as we go through. So if ABC Sporting Goods is bringing on Walmart as a client, we know there's going to be a big jump in sales year over year in the current year. The current year, of course, is forecasted because they're only part of the way through. So let's say, taking from what previously would have been base case estimates of 6% with a 55% gross margin, we know that sales growth is going to be very, very high this year. And perhaps it's a little bit higher than projected as there's carry forward. And then let's say, as we go through our projections, that it drops down to something a little more modest. One of the things we know, given the information in this mini case, but also just through common sense, is that their pricing power is going to be eroded because of the volume that a big buyer like a Walmart is taking. That's going to put downward pressure on gross margin. So let's assume, if we thought there was perhaps going to be 55% gross margin in our base case, that this drops all the way down to, let's say, 51. Remember, not all of their sales are going to be affected, but certainly the sales volume that's going to Walmart. And then we can assume perhaps they recover some of their pricing power going forward, get back to something a little more normal looking, maybe not quite 55%, but a higher number. And we can see how that affects our income statement as well as our cash flow statement by way of cash flow from operations. We can take these off now using Macabacus shortcut, Control-Shift- to remove the outside borders. You'll see we talked earlier about spark lines, which are here. Again, we only have 5 years of projections, but if you were looking at 10 years or more, it's a lot of information to digest, whereas the spark line shows you quickly big jump in sales year over year in year 1 of the projections, and then something much more modest going forward. Now, working down to the balance sheet, there's something else really important that we were told in this case. When we start thinking about big buyers that put a lot of pressure on their suppliers, of course, remember, ABC Sporting Goods is a supplier of Walmart. We know that these large companies drag out their payable days. This is definitely a bit of a weakness and potentially even a threat to this business, depending on the magnitude of how long they draw out those receivables and what kind of impact it could have on ABC's cash. Of course, Walmart's payables are ABC's receivables. So if our base case assumption was 60 days, what would happen, and I want you to watch the cash flow statement here, if the average receivable days was dragged out now to 70 days? And you see a big drop off in cash flow from operations. That may carry forward into subsequent years, and perhaps they recover a little bit, let's say 68, 66, maybe 64. We start to see the cash flow statement stabilize with cash flow from operations going up, but we do see a very big drop. The cash position goes down considerably year over year in this scenario because so much cash is being tied up in accounts receivable by virtue of slower payments coming from this customer, which is Walmart. We'll toggle off our border. The other thing that was introduced in the case was the tax rate. One party may go up, one party may go down. because this is so close to the bottom of the income statement, it would have a much more modest effect on the net earnings of this company, and it would have no effect on EBITDA because, as we know, taxes are added back to EBITDA. But you can see here, just by changing a few assumptions based on the qualitative information that we've been provided, in this case through a case study, but you may uncover this information through management interviews or any other different types of manner. I'm going to start that over. In this scenario, of course, we were given this information in a case, but it could be that you uncovered some of this through management interviews if you were working with smaller private companies and so on. And you can see how we take some of this qualitative information and how it can have a very, very serious impact on the company's financial results as you start to think about and conceptualize how qualitative information translates into a financial model and into quantitative analysis.